today's one, I wanted to talk about how it really feels to stammer. So there's been lots of things I've been through in the last 30 odd years, which makes me an expert on the subject of having a stammer. So since June this year, and I'm going to be completely honest as I can and put the impacts of what happens when you have a child with a stammer and you don't do anything about the stammer. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or a parent, but it's just really key that people understand the impacts that it has, and I'm a prime example of the impacts that it has. And a lot of the impacts have been inside my own head, and you hide them from everybody, and the repercussions of that are what happened to me this year. So I will revert back and talk you through some stuff and why it's really important that you, if you have a child with an issue with a stammer, it's really key that you go and try to fix it, or try to not fix it because they're fine, there's nothing to be fixed, but just to make them know that it's okay to stammer. So if I revert all the way back to when it first happened to me, when I was first aware. So something happened to me when I was 6 or 7, and that's something for another day, but the incident caused me to, I guess, revert back to a baby for protection, I guess. So one of the things that I knew that I could control was speech, and it not being a conscious thing because you're only a child, but you go into a protective mode. So, you know, I guess what you'd call it now is very anxious, and it developed into a stammer. And when you're a child in you're around 6, 7, you know, loads of kids, you know, when they're trying to talk, when they're trying to learn, they a lot of kids, I think it's like, is it 70% of kids have some form of speech issue, which is how you form your patterns and how you form like your fluency effectively. So, and then I got to an age probably about 7 or 8, and when you sort of become self-aware, and I knew that I wasn't necessarily like the other kids, and I was a bright kid, so I kind of knew and was aware that my speech probably wasn't the same as everyone else's. So, and this is in some respects not a dig at my parents or a dig at anybody, but you know, the late 80s, early 90s, I just guess it just wasn't from my perspective and from what I understand is that maybe it wasn't as prevalent and open as it is now. So any kind of stigma attached to whatever it was not hidden, but just kind of wasn't really said. So I got told a lot that, you know, you don't have, you know, you're fine, you know, it's, you just have too much to say and you're trying to get all of like the words out. Now in the family I knew somebody who already had a stammer, and again from a time where you would ridicule people, I guess, who had something that wasn't deemed, you know, the kind of everyday a normal person. So, and I kind of saw that, and I saw how people used to speak about this person. So I was, from a really young age, then associated that with a bad thing. So then I tried to hide. So from an early age, I already associated having a stammer as a bad thing that people would make fun of you of, because you're not the same as them, which looking back now seems absolutely crazy, but we're talking 30 plus years ago. So you get through school, and then when you're about 8 or 9 and you're in school, and that's when you kind of start to be really aware of yourself and different things. And I remember being in class and not being able to read, or being able to read but not being able to speak out loud. And probably why it was hidden, or why maybe I was, and maybe I'm trying to think of an excuse for my parents, is that there are 4 of us, and the others had issues as well, but theirs was around autism, and but I was seemingly, in terms of what's okay, I was a bright kid, a little bit advanced for my kind of age. But I guess the reason for that is because I knew at that age I couldn't maybe do some of the things that the other kids did. I like to read, and I kind of lost myself in books and that kind of stuff. So I guess I try to focus on that part, and I never got any of the help. Because my parents had their hands full with the other 3, because I was deemed okay, I was just left to continue on. And when you're a child, and it's easy to hide at home, so I used to just, I used to shout the loudest, I guess, and because I guess that, because I knew there was something maybe not quite right, maybe I used to scream out loudest because I knew there was an issue and nobody was listening to what I was trying to get across. And what I was trying to get across was that there was a problem, and I didn't know maybe at that stage how to come across, because you're only 9 or 10, but I knew at that stage there was an issue. There was an incident when I must have been about 9 or 10, where I wrote a piece for school, and I was excited and it was like a poem, and I did really, really well, and it was picked to be read out, and they wanted me to read it, and I fought so hard. So, no, I don't, and I pushed and I said, this is not something that I want to do, because I knew even at that stage, and I think that was the first time that I linked the pressure situation and talking together. And I remember feeling so traumatized and being forced to do something I didn't want to do. And even though for a couple of months, maybe a year before that, I'd already was trying to push to say that there was an issue, and I was always told, no, it's it's just because you have a lot to say for yourself, and I was pushed up there. And I remember standing there like it was yesterday and having to read out these words, which it seemed like there were a million words. And I remember I was probably about the fifth one in from the right, and when it came to me, like the spotlight, and and I just froze, and I kind of stuttered my way through it, stammered my way through the whole thing. And I think that was probably one of the biggest turning points, whereby that was the first time that I linked speech to anxiety, to fear. And from that point on, I then had a fear for speaking out loud, for speaking, and again, after that, even though my parents and I think my grandparents were there, nothing happened. Nothing still happened. You know, there was clearly an issue there. So let's talk about the fear as a child. So I can look back on it now and talk about it from an adult's view, and I have 3 children, so I can empathise with me when I was a child and having to go through this stuff, which at the time you don't understand what's happening. You don't understand what's happening, but you understand that something isn't right. And for me, I felt I was always quite internally thinking about it, I was always quite a lonely child, because I always felt, and I felt this from a young age, that I wasn't as good as everybody else, and I needed somebody to tell me that I was. I needed somebody to tell me that I was just like everybody else. And my heart breaks for myself at that age, being 8 and 9 and feeling so lonely. And there'd be times where, you know, I didn't sleep, and I was always told, because, you know, when I was a baby I never slept, and it was always because, you know, I was just a night owl, and, you know, I was awake. And what people didn't seem to realise or understand was I internalised everything, and I worried about everything, and I always had something racing through my mind. I was always overthinking everything, and you don't seem to realise that, because children are people pleasers. They try to please people, they try to please the parents, and all they want to do is make you happy as a parent and make us happy as a parent. And, you know, give you an example, if the worst thing in my kids' lives is if they think they've upset me, and even if I was to do something wrong, they would apologise to me, thinking that I was upset, and I would not want to upset my parents because I thought that there was something wrong. You know, after hearing about a person in family with a stammer, and, you know, they actively or participated in saying things about her, and I associated that with that was wrong, being told that I was fine, I just had too much to say. So I always felt like it was my fault, because it was, you know, I did it because I tried to talk a lot. Now, I didn't understand about a stammer. I didn't understand that I knew, but because I was told it's not, it's because of something that I did, then I became ashamed of it, and I tried to hide it. And then the more you try to hide it, and the more that it happens, you get anxious and you get scared. And I think we take for granted that children are okay, and even if you give children stuff, I can't. When I was a child, I pretty much had everything. I had a great home. I can't complain about any of that, but that's only part of it. If internally as a child you don't feel happy, and I don't think I ever was happy as a child. From a young age I was always a very serious child who always seemed like had a lot on his mind, and I did. Everything when you're a child is new, and you have these new experiences, and you enjoy these new experiences, but a lot of these new experiences for me were tainted by the fact that I knew that I'd have a problem with trying to speak. And the more, I was always I always had to put on this outwardly happy kind of kid, and I'd always try to be the class clown or try to make people laugh, but that was just to disguise or try to hide the fact that I couldn't speak. And even when I was, 12, 13 years old, and then you really change out, and you're trying to go through some stuff. And again, as a teenager, you want to be seen and kind of not heard, and you're trying to push boundaries. And I was such a frustrated teenager because I tried to push boundaries, but I couldn't push the boundaries because I couldn't get them out. So I didn't necessarily rebel and do anything bad, but what I did do was I just internalized it even more, and I became quite sad inside. And I think that's where it started. And I remember being probably about 15, and when you talk about like your mental health, and I remember for me that's probably when it started. It was when I was 15, and my parents did a really big thing, they moved schools, so they moved from Wales to England, and I came from a really small town, and I loved my school. I went to a really good secondary school, and I had some really good friends. Never had any issues, and I always felt protected. I always felt like I had friends, and for the first time I always felt safe. And that was really key for me, is being safe, being able to be in the company of people that know who you are, know your faults, they know your good points. And because I went to a sort of smaller school, and it was a really good school, so the point for me is I went to a really good school, and then that was taken away. And I remember being in a new place, changed schools, and this school was an horrendous, horrible school with not very nice kids, and I'm sure they're fine, but that was just my experience, where not only did I have an accent, but stammer, and for the best part of a couple of months, I was chased every day. People used to call me names, beat up, just all the stereotypical horrendous things that a child shouldn't have to go through. And again, because of stammer, again, it was just rammed home to me that it was, it was wrong. People were going to take the mickey out of you. I had one thing of friends where they were accepting, and just it wasn't really spoken about. It was never a thing, and I was just left to do it. And then you leave that safety net and go to the bigger world. And in my mind, I always knew that where I was from was a smaller part of the world. So when we went to London, to a bigger part of the world, which to me was the bigger world, I wasn't accepted in that school, and I wasn't accepted. So it just rammed home to me that stammering was wrong, something to be ashamed of. And as an impressionable teenager, again, my parents knew this, and nothing was done, nothing was said, nothing was ever done. So we fast forward again now to being about 17 or 18, and I left school at 16 because back in 1999 you could leave school. So again, if I'd had those 2 years between 16 to 18, if I hadn't been caught in terms of school, or had a person there who was able to see the potential or see something in me, just get me that help even at that stage. If I'd just been at school, I could have probably progressed on more, but I left school. I couldn't wait to leave school. I left school because I could hide, and from the age of 16 to 18, I basically just hid at home. I didn't want to go anywhere, and I was depressed. Thinking back now, I would stay awake all night, sleep all day. My parents worked hard. They worked really hard, and they had 4 kids to feed. They worked extremely hard. So again, I was able to hide. So instead of, and I was a reasonably bright kid. Again, I'd part of it again for me was I missed a lot of school. And thinking back, I missed a lot of school because I would feign an illness because I didn't want to go to school, because there were some times where there might be a trip or there might be some sort of thing that kind of happened, and I didn't want to go to school. I would do anything to avoid being in a situation, even at a young age, even at 9, 10. What I did was, instead of confronting my fear, but at that age you don't know what this is, I hid away from that fear. And then that was the form that I had then, being at 16 to 18. And I knew I had to do something when I got to 18 years old, because I couldn't spend all my life hiding away. And you get to 18 and you see people around you. But even at 18 years old, because I've been taken away from my friends, as it was, I then never had that friendship. I never had those groups, and even to this day, I like people a lot and I can talk to people, but I don't have a lot of friends, and it's really sad to admit, but a part of the reasoning for that is because I didn't want to put myself through trying to make friends. And when you have, or as I learned, things taken away, you just learn to just hide away. So because of that, I just withdrew within myself. So you live in your own head, or you live with the people around you. And because I hid away, I never really had a lot of close friends, and now I still don't have friends as it was. And again, that's a repercussion. These are the repercussions of not having that help at a really pivotal early stage. So, and then I managed then just through, I don't know what switched. I think the episodes at school, being chased, and I moved to London was one of the worst experiences of my whole life. And I think when you're forced into a corner and you feel like there is I felt so low. There were times where I was 15, and I've never said this to anybody, but there were times when I thought I could just end things, and there were times where I was just so depressed, where I was just so low. 15 and being that low and having nobody I felt that could talk to me, or I could talk to them. And we were pulled away from all the most important people, all of like my family, like my granddad, my uncles and that kind of stuff. So I was isolated, 15, parents who worked hard, but ironically by trying to create a better life and by trying to work as hard. And that's all they tried to do, was they didn't see what was in front of them, and that was a 15-year-old boy who just needed a hug, who needed to be told that it was okay, who needed help, who needed a guide and somebody to steer them through just this tricky time, to be told that it's okay to stammer, it's okay to not be normal, who is normal, and it's okay to be told. Because I wasn't told, I held that and I hid that. So the covertness then kind of happened, and when you're so low, the only way that you can go is either down, which means that that's the end for you, or you rise above it. And I don't know why, but I guess that I don't know what, I wasn't inspired necessarily by anybody, but I just managed to pull myself back and said to myself that I'm going to get through this. And it was, having a stammer didn't necessarily bring me to the low point. It was the nothingness of no help, and I couldn't see an end game. But ironically, it was the stammer that forced me to fight, because I had to fight. It was either 15 years old, it was either fight or die. And that's how I felt. And it sounds extreme, but that's how I felt. So I fought. And you kind of have these wins, and then you have these wins and your confidence, and then you have some moments to get where you would stammer. So to 18, I went to a college and met some friends, and I remember the day where you go and you meet all your friends and peers, and I was absolutely bricking it. We sat around and everyone had to say, who they were and their names and blah blah blah. And even now, somebody just asks you on the fly, like I just had somebody at the door with a parcel, and I'm always just like on hooks just in case they say name. They just ask me then, and I was absolutely fine, but it still goes in your mind. And thinking about it, and that was 22 years ago now, and I remember we sat around and they came to me and I said my name and I spoke for them. And that was a big win for me. And then I knew that I could I could, as much as I learnt when I was a child that when the pressure's on you get anxiety and that's when it happens, but also when you feel the pressure, and which sounds ridiculous saying that you feel anxiety when you just sat around in with some people and you have to say it, but that's what it's like for some people. And I said my name and I won, and on that day I won, and it was those little things then that kind of made me think, oh, why was I able to say it then and not in other situations? So you start to think and then you start to try things, and my brain then started to link doing different things or trying to breathe or trying to do different things, because I didn't know about, because I was never exposed, and the internet, I am older now, wasn't really a big huge thing then, back in the early 2000s, and because I'd always thought stammering was a taboo, I always thought, well, there isn't going to be a lot of stuff out there, and people, like, they can't be cured, and you just don't understand because you've got no context behind it. So I learnt these ways and how to breathe, and just how to just slow down and just try different things, and that's, I guess, where the battles of times where I'd be absolutely fine, fluency up speaking, and then times where it would just be gone. And then you get older, and then I was able to interview for jobs, and there's been many an interview where you sit there and that feeling where you wish the world would just swallow you whole, because and you can feel internally you're getting red, and you just want it to end. And I've had those, and you learn from those, and then you go on to the next one. But with every down experience, it does leave a battle scar, and the reason why it leaves a battle scar is because you're telling yourself that it's your fault, you're telling yourself that it's to do with you, and what you shouldn't be like the way you are. Every day for a long while, for 20 to 25 years, every day just thinking about it, every day thinking about having a stammer, every single day, every little tiny thing. But then you fight, you win, you lose, you win some, and then you start to win more, then you lose, and then you win a lot more, and then get to the point where I am now, where I battled, and the only reason why I battled was because I thought I had to fight. I thought there was something wrong with me. I was ashamed, not because, and I've met other people who have stammer, and I've heard of it more and more, but when you learn a behaviour and you learn a mindset for yourself, I've never been ashamed of other people. I've always thought people with a stammer are really, really brave, but I never saw myself like them, as in they are brave. It's not anyone's fault. They have nothing to hide, but because of the impact I had on myself, I couldn't see myself in that light. So for a long time, there'd be weeks and months, and I didn't know this at the time, but depression. I'd have classic signs where I'd have weeks where I'd be so low I wouldn't want to do anything at all. And I've always been into sport, or tried to be quite fit and active, and the things you love, you just don't want to do them anymore, and you're just tired, and you're sad, and you just feel so low. And you don't know why, and I can't explain it. And then you pick yourself up again. I was able, to kind of bring myself back from that point. But every time you do, every battle that you have, every time you tell yourself you are not a good person, there's something wrong, it leaves a mark, it leaves a scar. And the combination of all these 33 years of all these experiences, good and bad, in work, like out of work, having children, anxiety, stress, and then I got to a point this year where I wanted to end it all this year, and I don't know why. I've had years of, and it's not like I don't have a home, it's not like I don't have an amazing wife, kids, a job, but those are just things. My wife and kids are the most important things. Having a car, having a house, having stuff doesn't mean anything to me. My people in my life do. And every time, the best way to describe this is every time I stammered or I did something that I perceived which was me again, so it was always the issue is with me, I'd feel like I've let them down. And everything I've done or do for the last 12 years has been for my children. Everything I do is for them. And I just felt like every time I stammered or I did that, I let them down. And again, it's when you have 25 years of this battle inside your own head and nobody's had to fight the battle, and from the outside, you've got children, you've got your wife, you've got your house, and you've got a car, and people just don't see the battle, the scars that you have to get here. And there was a point where I wanted to end it all this year, and I got to a point where I was able to, I saw the signs and I was able to pull myself back and start opening up about all of my issues and the reasons why I'm stammering. And I've spoken to some really good people, I've spoken to some not so good people on this, but I spoke to Mind, and I recommend Mind fully, and I spoke to this person, and I've never spoken to anyone about this ever, and I completely opened up, and it sort of it kind of changed my thinking. When I still struggle with myself, and the journey has come to this point now where I want to take everything that I've learnt and my experiences and help other people and tell children that it's like, and tell kids that it's okay. It's okay to stammer. Everybody has something, and you should be proud to be. You should be proud to be who you are. It takes a lot to stammer. People don't seem to understand. It is tiring. It is a battle. It can be sometimes it's physical. It is mental. Honestly, people who have to go through this are honestly their fortitude, their mental strength, their resilience, they're just amazing. I can't even begin to tell you the battles that people have to go through. I can only and there are other elements, there are other things out there, but I can't speak about them because I've never been through that. I can only talk about my experiences, and I've been through them all. I've been through absolutely everything, every emotion, every experience to land where I am now, and I'm determined to help anybody that needs help or advice, or who just wants to chat. And we now need to promote this. Kids need help. Teenagers, who are going through stuff and they feel embarrassed. You don't need to feel embarrassed. People who are older, in their 30s, 50s, 60, any age where you feel like you've had to hide this for a long time, or you feel like it's no longer something that you need to hide anymore, because it's not good for your mental health. It's not good. It's perfectly okay. We shouldn't have to conform to the world. We belong to the world. We should be part of it. We should be as part of humans, and we shouldn't have to hide away. We're just another part of human beings, and the things that we do and the things we can't explain why this happens, it just does. And we're part of just another layer of people who need support, and we should be there for each other. So I implore you that if you have a child or a teenager or yourself, and you feel like you need some advice, or you feel like you need some help, contact Stammer, the doctor. Just contact somebody, and don't let this rule you. Don't be concerned. Just get the help that you need, and there are people out there who will support you, and that includes me. And on that somber note, I wish you well, and ask you to like, favourite and subscribe, and stay safe, stay healthy. And I've been John. This is The Stammerer. Take care.